I feel like that when it comes to retro handheld emulators, there's a specific balance that needs to be had. It's the balance between power as well as price point, and more importantly, at least for me personally, it's ergonomics. And I feel like almost all of them kind of try to strive for that balance, and some get really close. But I've got to say, with the Anbernic RG557, it has definitely gotten very, very close to hitting that mark. I feel like this handheld is perfect for beginners. So if you're somebody that is getting into retro handheld emulation, this is right up your alley, because in many ways, this is a set it and forget it type of handheld. It runs Android, so it does also allow you to go nice and deep into the experience and get tweaks going so that you get the perfect experience for yourself. So I've had this handheld for roughly around a month and a half, 2 months. And in that time, I played all sorts of games and I've tried out all sorts of emulators. But one of the things that I did want to go ahead and mention that I tried out throughout this time is that I gave this handheld to my son. He's 9 years old and I wanted to see what he would do, whether or not he would be able to figure out how to play games and how to get things going. The only time that I actually helped him with this was he wanted to install an English translation of Mother 3. And there was like a mod with like the ROM in order to actually get into like the folder and things like that. But aside from that, he was able to do everything himself, navigate through the menus, play the games that he wanted to go ahead and play, and as well as like save games on there. So the ease of use of the RG launcher on this handheld is absolutely fantastic. And because there's so much power that is packed inside, he can play any games that he wants with relative ease. Now, the power that is packed inside is all thanks to that Dimensity 8300 from MediaTek, paired with the Mali G615 MC6 GPU. It does also come with 12 gigabytes of LPDDR5X RAM, and there is 256 gigabytes of internal storage. I also wanted to go ahead and mention that the AMOLED screen is absolutely immaculate, though there are some issues with it, which I'll talk later on in this video. And the battery is actually fantastic. He was able to go ahead and play across the transatlantic flight that we took to get here, and no issues at all. He didn't run out of battery. There was plenty of battery even for the layover that we had. It was just awesome. So when it comes to this handheld, in terms of like power specs and what it can go ahead and do, it's just ridiculously impressive. I have got to give kudos to Anbernic. Now, there are some things that I want to go ahead and talk about later on, some negatives that are there, but overall, in terms of a total package, it's pretty solid. I feel like I'm going to do like a Linus segue when it comes to this, but you know, it has a lot of power. The webcam from today's sponsor, OBSBot.
This is the Tiny 2 from OBSBot, and it is by far the most powerful webcam that I've ever used. Now, technically, this is a plug-and-play webcam that you can plug it into any laptop or desktop and it'll work just fine, but it's recommended that you download the OBSBot Center app in order to unlock all of the features that are packed inside. Things like AI tracking, live tracking, gesture controls, even voice control. So if you wanted to move out of the frame, it'll just follow you with ease. Voice commands on this are fantastic. For example, all I've got to do is tell it, zoom in closer, and it zooms in. If I wanted for it to zoom out, all I would have to say is zoom out further. It'll blink a couple times and it'll zoom out. And because of the CMOS sensor that's inside, you can have up to 4K 30 FPS, and there's even dual native ISO, which means that you can get great performance and quality in the low lighting situation. The low light performance of this sensor is fantastic. I mean, here I only have the lights in front of me from the laptop. It's currently 8:05 p.m. and it knows exactly where to focus, despite there being a little bit of window light that's like coming in over here. But aside from that, this is all the light that we have, and the quality is pretty awesome. On top of that, you are going to get HDR as well as beauty modes and filters. There's even a desktop mode to show off what's happening on your desktop whenever you want, as well as a whiteboard mode to do any sort of presentation. And all of this goes through a USB 3.0 cable, which means that you're going to get uncompressed image and quality. Now, if you're concerned about privacy, there is a privacy mode that you can toggle on that'll have the camera point straight down to the base that's right here. This camera is compatible with a ton of different streaming apps, whether it's Zoom, Google Meet, whatever it may be. That way you'll be the best looking one in your meetings. And if you're using this for content creation, it naturally integrates into OBS, YouTube Live, whatever it is that you're going to be using on whatever platform. In the box, you're going to get the Tiny 2 as well as an adjustable mount that's magnetic, a USB-C 3.0 cable, and a USB-C to A adapter in case you need it for whatever it may be, and a storage case itself, which I think is pretty awesome because I travel a lot and I would want to protect this little guy. Now, whether you're a content creator, a professional, or just somebody that wants to up their video game, follow the link down in the description to get your OBSBot Tiny 2, and thanks to OBSBot for sponsoring this video.
All right, now that some bills are paid, we can go ahead and talk about pricing and availability for this thing. Now, the Anbernic RG557 is not cheap. without any sort of SD card with installed games, you're looking at $249.99. If you want a 128 gigabyte card, you are looking at $264.99. And if you want a 256 gigabyte card, you're looking at $279.99. So it's definitely a little pricey, and it puts it up there in terms of the almost premium retro handheld emulators. This goes up there with anything else in that price point. Now, one of the things that I do want to go ahead and mention is that despite that price point, when I did unbox this, it left this impression of just comfort. I can't overemphasize how comfortable it is to actually play on this handheld. The only thing is that it is slightly a little bit too small. And this could be just because I have man hands, I don't know, but it definitely left a little bit to be desired when it comes to the overall size of things. Did my hands cramp up while I was playing? No, it felt just fine. The joysticks are really small, and despite that, they're still really responsive. Whenever I was playing games, I didn't have to worry about, cardinal snapping or anything like that. Things just ran well, which kind of got me really excited when I was playing more 3D centric games that are on PlayStation 2 or GameCube and so on and so forth. It was an awesome experience overall. The unboxing experience was very similar to other Anbernic devices, so you are going to get a little bit of documentation as well as a USB-C to USB-A cable, a couple of cloths or wipe cloths to prep the screen for an also included screen protector, and you're also going to get some joystick caps this time around. And I think that the reason why they're including that is because of the fact that the joysticks on this handheld are pretty small. Now, the button placement is perfect, at least for me. I found that everything was right where I wanted it to be on this handheld. The D-pad feels a little bit mushy. It almost feels like, when you have like a controller for a really long time and you break into it, so it kind of has like this, mushy feeling to it. It kind of feels like that, but the pivot that's there in the center of the D-pad means that you're going to be able to go ahead and play the game without too many misinputs. In fact, when I was testing that out using Tekken 6 on the PSP, like that, it ran beautifully and there weren't any misinputs at all. The only issue was my lack of skill. But aside from that, it was absolutely fantastic when I was playing that. I also tried out Street Fighter 3 Alpha, and that also ran really well, and I didn't have any issues, aside from, again, that lack of skill in comparison to the CPU. But aside from that, it was a great experience, honestly. The face buttons feel a little bit mushy as well, which is something that I should mention, but that didn't really affect me personally. Like, if you really wanted to go ahead and mash it, you'll eventually get like a little bit of a click here and there, but for the most part, it was a pretty quiet handle. Like, here, check this out. It's pretty quiet. So I never really had to worry too much about things. Now, I will say that overall, the triggers, they felt relatively nice, but the really noisy buttons that were there were actually the shoulder buttons. They're very, very clickety-clackety here. Super clicky. And overall, it's not like a bad thing per se. I mean, it doesn't annoy me. It doesn't annoy my wife or my son. It's just kind of just there. But it is something that I know will annoy some people if they want something that is a little bit quieter and has a little bit more of a mush feel to it. But, it's there. I felt like it's worth mentioning. My son wanted me to make sure that I added these 2 points that he mentioned when I talked to him about what he thought about the handheld. First and foremost, the battery life is amazing. Now, he mainly plays, GBA, some SNES, some N64 titles from time to time. And he was just like, I am so amazed at how well the battery lasts. He mentioned that it survived a 9-hour flight and 2 days of leisure play. So to give you an idea, and obviously this is not consistent, this is just him, playing and doing things. But yeah, he was definitely impressed with that. And he also mentioned that the Android modded with the RG launcher gave him a console-like experience, so it was very easy for him to understand how to actually do things. Now, back to my point, I want to go ahead and talk about the AMOLED screen, because the AMOLED screen, although it is beautiful, OLED is fantastic. If you are somebody that is sensitive to PWM flickering, then you are going to notice that, like, this is going to give you a headache if you play on it for a long period of time. Thankfully, and I'm knocking on something, I don't have that, so I didn't really notice it that much when I was playing, but I noticed it when I started recording footage for this video. It's very easy to see that through the camera itself, but I do not see it with the naked eye. So it is very, very apparent, and I don't think that I've seen flickering like this on any handheld, especially this badly, in a very, very long time. Now, despite that, the screen still gets really bright for the most part, though I will say if you were to take this outside and get it in like direct sunlight or almost indirect sunlight, then yeah, it definitely leaves a lot to be desired in terms of being able to see whatever it is that you're playing on, even at max full brightness. But if you were to play this like in the shade, you'll be fine. You don't really have to worry too much about things when it comes to that. So you're still going to get a nice punchy picture. You're still going to get the benefits of OLED. It's just not going to be something that you're going to be playing in direct sunlight. The software that's behind all of that, though, is honestly awesome. I love the fact that this actually just gets full over-the-air updates when it comes to the firmware and software on this thing. Because one of the things that I dislike about some of the cheaper retro handhelds is that when you actually want to update the firmware or software, you have to take out the card, you have to flash the actual firmware onto said card. And if you have somebody that doesn't know what they're doing trying to do that, it could just lead towards so many headaches and so many issues. With this, it is all done straight from their servers, which makes things so much easier and so much more convenient. And I feel like that's a quality of life update that if you have a handheld that has Wi-Fi capabilities, why can't it just update the firmware, from the server when it gets pushed? At least that's just my opinion when it comes down to that. That being said, there are a lot of things that have been updated and changed with this handheld since it was first launched. Now, I've talked a bit about the front end and how great it is to actually have this on this handheld, and it just bears mentioning because this is just such a smooth experience. And in terms of somebody that doesn't want to go ahead and set up emulation stations, somebody that doesn't want to go ahead and, deal with different, ROMs and different emulators and different applications on here, everything just works right out of the box with a quick initial setup. And I think that that's something that should be mentioned, especially if you want to get something like this. You don't want to deal with all that stuff. You kind of just want something that plays older titles without having to worry about things. This is it when it comes to that. Now, it's not 100% perfect. There are some instances where I ran, let's say a PS2 a game, and there was like an overlay that was there, and I needed to go into the emulator settings in order to actually turn that off. Things like that, small things like that, I feel like should be 100% fixed before shipped. But even still, like if you have something like this, it doesn't take, too much difficulty to Google how to actually turn that off. It's actually pretty easy, and it's a couple of, taps and swipes and boom, like you're done. But still, it is something worth mentioning because this isn't 100% done in its entirety for all of the emulators that are there. If you're playing something that's like PlayStation 1 or before or older than that, then yeah, you'll be fine because everything's going to run through RetroArch and it'll just work. But if you're running something that requires a dedicated emulator, something like PS2, something like GameCube or Wii or Wii U or 3DS, then you might need to, learn a little bit about the individual applications and how to actually adjust settings to turn off things like overlays or get button mapping just right. But aside from that, you kind of don't have to worry too much about things like that. Now, the cool thing is that this is Android, and they have done a couple of things. Anbernic has done a couple of things to actually tweak and modify the experience so that it is very much into the whole ecosystem that they're doing. For example, you can technically launch the RG launcher or the front end that's there by pushing this button that is right here on the Anbernic RG557, but you can also pull down the Android menu and toggle it on that way as well. And in that menu, there are a bunch of different options that are available to you so that you can customize and get the best experience possible. For example, if you wanted to, you can actually pull down the menu and you can key map different parts on the screen so that you can play games like, I think it's called Withering Waves or like Genshin Impact, games like that that are cell phone centric games that typically have, touch input but don't support controllers. Then that would be a way to actually get that game to technically support your controller because you're key mapping different parts of the screen to different buttons. And in my experience, it has worked relatively well, but sometimes there are definitely some issues that pop up with that. You kind of just have to like tweak and adjust and get things just right. But for the most part, it does allow you to have an intuitive and almost a native feeling experience. One of the cool things with this handheld is that you can technically toggle on your CPU that is built into a higher mode or a higher clock speed. Now, what you do is you essentially go into that drop-down menu into Android, and it should by default be set to auto, which it'll essentially just go ahead and set up the handheld and the CPU to go to whatever clock it needs to run the games that are there. But in some instances, you need to toggle that on to go into high mode. Particularly, I noticed that I needed that when I was playing games on the Wii U. Some Wii titles, but mainly Wii U. And if you wanted to run some Switch games, I would definitely recommend turning that on for the most part. But even still, Switch games just don't run well at all. But for Wii U, you definitely needed something like that just to give you that extra boost that was there when it came down to it. While we're talking about the Android menu, I would recommend that you turn off the auto rotate if it is on and just have a forced landscape mode. That way it'll just be easier for you to actually, play the games. And if you're laying down on the couch or you're doing whatever, it won't actually flip around and you'll just have a consistent landscape mode for this handheld itself. Now, if you're going to be streaming from like xCloud or something like that, or you're playing games through Moonlight, then I would definitely recommend swapping the button placements that are here digitally. If you go into the menu, there's an NS mode button that's there. You just click that, and then from there, you can adjust everything from the triggers to the buttons that are there. And that way it'll be easier for you to actually play the games that you want to go ahead and play. That way you don't have to mentally swap things as they are, because whenever I swap from PC to Nintendo and back, it's a headache, but it is nice to have something like that built into the OS itself. Now, if you're into RGB, which I am personally not, then you can actually set that all up in there. If you just go ahead and just press the button in the Android menu, you're going to have a short little menu pop up where you can pick the different options that are there. But if you want to go ahead and go even deeper, all you have to do is long press that same button and a separate menu will pop up where you can fine tune the RGB experience to your content, as long as you're 100% happy with it. Me personally, I just kind of turn it off. I don't really care for it. But for people that want that aesthetic and that vibe, it's there. You can go ahead and use it, and you can customize to your heart's content. Now, the last over-the-air update included an AI, and I kind of use air quotes on that because of the fact that it's not exactly 100%, something that would be crazy. It's just a large language model with some text-to-image prompts features, but there are some interesting features that I personally like for somebody that plays a lot of games. Now, first and foremost, when you open it up, you're going to get 3 different options, and I do recommend checking out the different examples that are there because you can see what different things you can do. For example, there's a text-to-image prompt option that's there. You can also technically use this for fixing old images or old photos if you want to. And another thing is that there's like an AI assistant bot that's in there too, but I'll talk about that later on. Now, the other option is to simply just chat with your bot that's there, or your AI, and you can put in any prompt that you want and it'll respond accordingly. I do think that that's kind of cool because if you need, help with a specific game, or if you have questions about some things, technically that is something that could go ahead and, get information. You can swap different AI models that are there. I think by default it's on DeepSeek. So depending on what it is that you want to do, I think there's only 2 options as of right now. I don't know if they're going to add more later on, but for the most part, DeepSeek does a pretty good job. I don't know, it does all right. Now, at least for me, the biggest thing with this whole AI app that was added on with the last over-the-air update is the fact that you have AI translation right then and there on the screen. Now, when you first open up the app, on the right side of the panel, you're going to get kind of like this little drawer that you can pull across, and that's always available whenever you're outside of the application and anywhere else on the 557. So let's say that you're playing a game and it is a Japanese port of a specific game that isn't available in the US, but you really want to go ahead and play it. One of the things that's cool is that you can use the AI translator to translate that game as you go. Now, it's not going to be continuous, so it pretty much translates whatever's on screen, and if the text changes or if something moves, that text that is presented on the screen will remain there. So you need to make sure that you're constantly pushing things as it's going. In my opinion, the best way of actually using this is with a turn-based RPG or something that has scrolling text or something like some sort of like dialogue or something like that. That way you can translate things as you go. It's not necessarily the fastest in the world, but I do like the fact that that is an option that's there. Now, most of the games that I do play have English or Western releases of these games, but if there's something that was never released in the West, then it's nice to have the option to be able to play these games anyway. One thing that I did want to go ahead and mention with using that AI translator is that by default, it is going to be translating everything into Chinese. So in order to change that, you want to make sure that you go into the settings of the AI translator and adjust it to the appropriate language. It's pretty easy to just go in and pick the language that you speak. I do think that the amount of languages that are available are pretty limited. I think there's only like 12 or 13 that I saw, but it does have English, so I was okay. It also has Spanish, so I was okay with that as well. Now, when talking about actually running games on this thing is a freaking beast. I have not had any issues with this unless I'm talking about more modern platforms. I'm talking about Wii U, Switch emulation. That has been not the most beautiful experience, especially, you know, starting at Wii U. I mean, technically you can turn on that CPU mode that's there onto high, and then you can also turn on the fan mode from auto to strong. And when you do that, the fan's going to kick in. It's obviously going to be cranking air and trying to keep things cool. And the CPU is going to be set at a higher frequency. But with that, you are going to get a somewhat better experience. Is it going to be perfect? No, but it is going to be much better than having it without that actually running. Now, I will say that aside from that, GameCube, PlayStation 2, Wii, as well as, you know, everything before that, ran just fine. I didn't have any issues at all. Everything just ran perfectly. And in most instances, like for example, PlayStation 2, I could run it at 2x, 2.5x resolution. And it's just beautiful. Like, this is essentially what me as a kid wanted when the PlayStation 2 was out. I wanted to be able to play these games. Devil May Cry 3, for instance, like going out and not having to be tied to a television. It's such a cool experience. I love where all of this is coming from. It's so dang fantastic. So in terms of performance, you don't really have to worry too much about things. And the cool thing is that the older the title is, the less power that is being consumed. Now, battery life on this is actually pretty fantastic in terms of what I've seen. If you're playing something that is a little bit more taxing or intensive on the system, something like, I don't know, PlayStation 2, GameCube, Wii U, so on and so forth, then you are going to get like around 2.5 hours to like 2 hours and 45 minutes on average. But if you're playing something that's like GBA, SNES, Famicom, like stuff like that, you're going to be looking at around like 8 hours, 9 hours. Like my son, he throughout the entire flight from, you know, Florida to here in Europe, like he was playing almost the entire time and the battery did not die, not even once. He was just playing, going about his business, playing Mother 3. Well, actually, he's playing Earthbound, Mother 2, and he was absolutely loving it. And then he went to Mother 3. But regardless of that, no issues at all. And I think that that's something that bears mentioning, because if you want to play something like this for PS Vita or PSP or anything like that, that is, you know, not super intensive, but also, you know, somewhat taxing on the system, you could get around 3, 4, maybe even 5 hours out of it. It really just depends on the games that you're going to be playing on this thing. One of the biggest downfalls with this handheld are the speakers. Like, they are just absolutely atrocious. If you've been following the channel, you know that I hate downward firing speakers or upward firing speakers or anything that isn't actually pointed at you, the user. Speakers should be pointing at you, not into the air. So these are no different. They actually they point down, so they actually, when you're holding it, your hands kind of essentially like cover it up. So it definitely isn't the best experience possible. The speakers should be elsewhere on the system in order to have like a better experience for the end user. But yeah, downward firing speakers, they're not good, and their range is weird because there's this kind of like midpoint where it goes from being too quiet, like very quiet, to being almost too loud. So I would definitely recommend either connecting Bluetooth headphones or using a wired connection, because there is a 3.5 millimeter jack over here. it's kind of disappointing. That's one of the things that I really don't like about this, is that the speakers just are not that great. They're not that powerful, and there really isn't much that you can do to actually adjust this to make it a better experience. So who exactly is the RG5574? I'm going to look at this from two different perspectives. One is the person that has no idea what they're doing. This is going to be their first handheld ever. And then the other side of the spectrum is somebody that has been doing this for quite some time, has their own handheld collection, and this is just going to be another powerful piece of hardware that they're going to add to their repertoire, so to speak. Now, from the person that hasn't done this at all and is looking at this as their first retro handheld, this is very easy to use. It is something that is so easy to use that it kind of almost puts everything else to shame in a sense. And the reason being is because of that front end, that RG launcher. It just makes it very easy to go in, play the games that you want to go ahead and play, and continue playing without having to tweak settings or adjust things, aside from like, an overlay here or there. It just runs. And I think that's obviously a beautiful thing, but it also definitely shows what could happen when a handheld is set up right from the get-go and sold to the consumer. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, if you want to tweak and you want to adjust things and get things going, this is great. It's a powerful piece of hardware, but based off of what I've seen online, I don't have one, but the Retroid Pocket 5, even the Retroid Pocket 4, which I do have, was a phenomenal experience, but it did require some setup on my end. If you want to go ahead and tweak and adjust and get things going, then the Retroid Pocket 5, all assumptions being my own because I don't have one, would probably be a better option for most people, based off of my experience with the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. But that being said, this is a beast of a handheld, has phenomenal battery life, has phenomenal power, has a great library straight from the get-go. It's very easy to recommend something like this. So guys, let me know what you guys think of the RG557. If you want to hear my thoughts on the RG34XXSP, then click this video over here. And if you want to hear my comparisons between the Switch 2 from Nintendo and the Steam Deck OLED from Valve, then click this video over here. And until next time, guys, I will see you on the next one. Peace.